Now let's bring you a voice on what is happening on the ground. Nebal Farsakh is with me this morning. Nebal is a spokesperson for the Palestine Red Crescent Society. Nebal is in Ramallah this morning. We didn't have a chance to say hello in that commercial break, so let me just say, number one, Nebal, hello. I'm Heather. Welcome to our program. We are delighted to have you as part of our show today, so thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I want to come back to those live pictures, and you'll certainly be following this, Nebal. The Rafah border crossing again open, yes, to foreign nationals, but to those severely wounded Palestinians who are out to get medical attention. These are the first Palestinians now out of Gaza since October the 7th, Nebal, and I'm just wondering what your reaction is to what's happening at the border crossing today.
It is just an extremely important step. Literally, we're talking about many Palestinians who are in critical conditions now, and they are in urgent need of getting treatment outside of Gaza because simply healthcare workers, doctors, nurses are just overwhelmed trying to save people's lives who are getting injured every single second. So they are unable to implement a kind of surgeries, and this means that those who are critically injured will lose their life if they are not going to get the treatment they need, especially that we're talking about all hospitals now are lacking very essential medical supplies. So now it's an opportunity for those people to live, to have life, because they are going to get treatment outside of Gaza Strip. Hopefully, we can also send other people who are critically injured, because we're talking right now about almost over 80 patients who are critically injured, but obviously from the largest number of injuries, there's many who are still need to get the treatment outside of Gaza. Hopefully, dozens of others will get the opportunity to get treatment outside of Gaza Strip. And let's remember that there's already some patients with chronic diseases who had already a scheduled appointment outside of Gaza to implement several surgeries, and now they are denied to go to get the treatment that they should do. We also call a non-stop safe entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza, including fuel. Up to the moment, we are unable to get fuel into Gaza, although we are urgently need fuel, because basically all ambulances are running on fuel to continue operating and save the lives of people who are wounded and injured every single minute,
Nebal, can I just interrupt you? Sorry, because we're looking at pictures of aid trucks coming in, and I think that fuel point is so important because the PRCS, one of the jobs is not just to care for, but also to transport people to hospital to get medical attention. So you need the fuel for that transport responsibility as well. But when you look at the aid vehicles coming in, again, with that border crossing open today, and our reporter saying there have been several dozen trucks, obviously that's still a drop in the bucket. But is there any optimism at all that with the Rafah border crossing opening today, this could be a sign of more aid being allowed to flow in?
I hope so, but basically for over a week, we have been coordinating efforts to allow the entry of the humanitarian aid. Up to this moment, as you just said, the amount of trucks are getting in is only a drop in the ocean. It can't even fulfill the humanitarian needs of over 2 million civilians who are now lacking food, water, with no electricity, with no medicine, with only nothing. So in order just to feed over 2 million civilians who are lacking food and water, you can imagine how many trucks is needed to get in. What was let in is only like 3% of what is needed. Taken into consideration that also all hospitals now are literally collapsing. They are running out of medical supplies and medicines. And most importantly, we are running out of fuel. Up to this moment, not 1 liter of fuel has been allowed to get in. This means that all hospitals now in Gaza are at the risk of shutting down, because with no fuel, that means there is no electricity, because we are now completely relying on backup generators to have electricity. With no electricity, those hospitals were shut down, stopped operating, as well as that means putting in danger thousands of lives,
Yes.
because we have many patients who are connected to life support machines, to oxygen. There's babies in incubators. Cutting electricity, that means killing of those patients. Hopefully, the international community can intervene immediately to allow a non-stop, safe entry of a humanitarian aid, including fuel.
Can I ask, Nebal, in terms of the hospital, Israel told you to evacuate Al-Quds Hospital, and that's one we've been focusing on a lot. And there was a video of airstrikes in the area. I'm wondering what the status is of Al-Quds this morning, whether there is an evacuation attempt underway, what you're doing with all of the patients there, and also the patients who are seeking refuge in and around that hospital. What is the status of Al-Quds this morning?
The status is we are under intense bombardments in the surrounding area of Al-Quds Hospital for over days. These airstrikes has even buildings who are only for 15 meters away from the hospital. Now it's like impossible to go out from the hospital or to the hospital to Tel El-Hawa area due to a huge destruction of all the surrounding area of Al-Quds Hospital. People, patients, medical staff, civilians who are internally displaced in the hospital are encounter to continuous bombardments that is taking place all over day and night. At night times, you can imagine the horror and fear of civilians who are hearing very strong bombardments that is taking place very near to the hospital. It's literally make the whole building shaking all the night because of this bombardment. It has resulted to some damages of the building and the HQ because they are connected to each other, like at least the glass fell down, a part of the floor ceiling also fell down, and we have been under this constant fear and horror of being bombed at any second. We have announced it repeatedly. We don't have the means to evacuate Al-Quds Hospital. We don't have the means to evacuate around 500 patients who are, many of them are in the intensive care unit connected to life support machines. We have babies in incubators. Evacuating them means risking their lives, means killing them. This is not only our opinion, even the WHO has announced evacuation orders against hospitals are impossible to implement, and they constitute a death penalty for patients. We have over 14,000 civilians, all of them, most of them are children and women. They are now currently sheltering inside the hospital. You can see them lying on the corridors or even in the front door of the hospital because simply they don't have any place to go to. Either they lost their homes, Israel forced them to evacuate themselves to the south under intense bombardment. There is literally no safe place in Gaza. They only sought refuge to the nearest hospital, to us, thinking they would be in a safe place. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and now we are being a threat constantly from Israel occupation forces of evacuation orders, and the hospital is going to be bombarded. Please come and see the situation inside the hospital.
Well, we're looking at video actually right now.
14,000 civilians
Yes.
lying out on the ground with nothing, no food, no water, nothing. Could you imagine of a situation of babies and children, women?
We're looking right at that. Yeah, Nebal, we're watching that.
Nothing.
Let me just add, it's just a devastating scene, you're right, and we're looking at those pictures. I also want to watch another scene. Well, I do want to ask you, Nebal, I'd like to ask you about...
Watching that is not as living that. Watching that is not as living that.
No.
Could you imagine your life without water, without electricity? Could you imagine not being able to have a shower for 2-3 weeks? Could you imagine having to stay in line for 4-5 hours to go to use the toilet? No. No one, no human being in this world can even handling the very hard conditions that Palestinians have to live because of this ongoing escalation that is taking place for over 26 days. No one can handle it.
You know, and we have been listening very strongly to voices like yours and other officials there talking about the worsening situation and the conditions which are increasingly critical to attend to. I want to ask one final thought from today. I'm not sure if you've been called in to respond. We'll bring up some pictures of one of the stories in our news today, and that is the airstrike right at the Jabalia refugee camp, the largest in Gaza. I don't know if the PRCS responded directly to this or if you have any information on what you're hearing as a result of this and what you think the implications of this might be.
Absolutely. As you know, the Palestine Red Crescent is the lead emergency medical service provider in Gaza Strip. So since the beginning of the escalation, our teams are literally working around the clock, trying to save as much people as they can. Yesterday, what happened, it was absolute a massacre. It is, by the way, one of the most densely populated in Gaza Strip. And what happened is you're talking about hundreds of victims. Most of them are children and women. Complete residential square has been razed to the ground. Our teams face great challenges trying to evacuate as much people as they can. However, many civilians are still under the rubble because the teams can't even evacuate them. It was so hard and challenging for them to reach the place where the bombardment took place because there was complete destruction of the surrounding area, which make the movement of the ambulance harder. That's why they just jump on foot, trying to reach the wounded people, evacuate them as much as they can. The situation in hospitals was even catastrophic. Hospital overwhelmed, can't even deal with this very large number of casualties that took place in 1 minute, which has resulted that many wounded people have to wait in corridors without getting treatment because doctors, nurses, they were trying to prioritize the cases and then try to save as much people as they can. And then you have to wait until your turn will come to get the treatment. It's just horrific and heartbreaking to see this much of civilians are losing life. We're talking about most of them are children and women. This should be stopped, and we call on the international community to intervene immediately to ensure the protection of civilians and healthcare workers and healthcare facilities according to the international humanitarian law.
There's been a lot of condemnation from countries in the area, from Arab countries in the area, talking about this as a complication in negotiation and looking at things in the situation as it continues. Nebal Farsakh, I thank you very much. We'll stay in touch, continue to follow the story very closely. Nebal in Ramallah in the West Bank. And again, Nebal was mentioning in talking about, as we look here live at the Rafah border crossing, the numbers are out of the airstrike in Jabalia. The latest number officially we've had from any Hamas officials is more than 50 people killed and about 150 injured. So that is the most recent as far as any official documentation, but certainly dozens of people killed in that airstrike.